Hello and welcome to the second episode of Why Wasn't It Better? I'm Patrick Darms.
And I'm Anton Paras.
And although this is technically our second episode, it's really the first because we're going to talk about our very first movie, Planet of the Apes.
I was really pushing for Stuart Little, but we decided, you know what, this is probably the more accurate film to really go out with all of the strong points that we highlighted in our previous episode. So we'll be going over the same format, criteria, and structure. Really, Planet of the Apes just hits all of those check boxes quite excellently.
It does. In case anyone didn't listen to the first episode where we outlined the criteria of the movie, we gave a little teaser at the end. And I think it's important we mention this is the 2001 Planet of the Apes directed by Tim Burton, because I would not want anyone to think that we are going to, in any way, say anything negative about the original Planet of the Apes, which is a great movie.
Right. In fact, I mean that original Planet of the Apes is just a huge reason why, like, we're even in this mess with this 2001 Planet of the Apes.
Oh, you know,
it was such a good film that they wanted to remake it.
You're right. I'm gonna. Yes, you're right. This was released on July 27th, 2001 by 20th Century Fox. As we mentioned, directed by Tim Burton, screenplay by William Broyles Jr., Lawrence Connor, and Mark Rosenthal, starring Mark Wahlberg, Tim Roth, Helena Bonham Carter, Michael Clark Duncan, Paul Giamatti, and a whole bunch of other pretty well-known actors. The budget
was at?
$100 million.
Ugh, big.
And it made $362 million at the box office.
Okay.
Yeah, it made money, although I think it is important. On paper, it looks like it made a lot of money, but I think it's important to outline that the number that you see at the budget does not include the marketing costs, and they don't usually make that public. The marketing costs are usually equivalent to the budget, so they were probably in the hole for something like $200 million. So 362, it's not a great haul.
No, especially for a movie with everything that we just laid out. Yeah. This is Halloween Tim Burton, Marky Mark in what should have been a vehicle for him to really rise in the ranks of Hollywood stardom.
Why have you chosen this movie?
Well, let's go back and think about the context of what does the Ape franchise mean? Now, this was really just going back to the history of itself as a book. It was a novel, right? Originally,
yeah.
by a French author. I'm gonna attempt to pronounce Pierre Bouy, I believe, in 1963.
Depends on where you live.
Yeah, followed by that fantastic film that we touched on, the adaptation from 1968, starring Charlton Heston, which by all accounts is critical and commercially a huge hit, and it sparked.
I think worth pointing out that movie holds up really well.
Oh, 1,000,000%. I mean, just yeah. It was a hit critically and commercially so much that they had a lot of following sequels, which weren't always too great from 1970 to 1973. Some of you may recall Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and less left off with Battle. Yeah, Conquest, but left off with Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Nothing quite as successful as that original. They did have a live-action TV series in 1974 and that animated series in 1975. So studios were trying to milk this franchise for what it was worth after that historically critical release.
Doing the research for this, I had no idea that they made 2 TV series. I was kind of blown away by that.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. We'd be able to dig that up. Love it.
I kind of don't want to, but... But
I say roll the tape. Let's look.
If you happen to stumble upon them, let me know.
Yeah, I think I'd have to find like the laser disc of it. But yeah, I mean, when we think back to all the headlines that there's an Apes remake coming, who do studios attach to the film that made sense at the time?
Tim B.
Yeah, Timmy B. Tim Burton. And he was a huge at the time. Kind of now, kind of.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. His star's fading a
and
little. Yeah.
right, and it's a summer film. It's an opportunity to really drive the stardom of new and rising stars. So good to attach a hot name to that film. So why not use underwear model and rapper Marky Mark
Why not?
for why not? So it was an opportunity for Mark Wahlberg, of course, to really attempt at leading that massive blockbuster. He did have a year before that starred in the film The Perfect Storm, but of course that was a sidekick to George Clooney,
Yeah,
who was
he had been
reigning king.
around. Yeah, he had been around a few years. He was obviously, he had been in a number of successful movies. He gets his big breakthrough in 1997 with Boogie Nights. But you're right. This was really the first time he was like gonna lead a huge blockbuster, and I was shocked by revisiting this how young he looked. I mean, it's obvious.
Right, and there's the difference between the critical reception of wow, he's got acting chops to okay, how do we get everyone in America to agree I want to watch more Mark Wahlberg films?
Yeah,
So this was that movie,
this
or
was
it
his
was
big
supposed to be
chance.
that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, we will get into that. I was so excited because I asked you to pick the first movie that we're going to cover, and I was so excited when you said you wanted to do this one because I had not seen it in probably the year after it came out. So we're talking over 20 years at this point. I had forgotten how excited I was for this movie when I first saw the trailer. This had a banger trailer. I guess it would have been like late 2000 when I saw it, and in
Right. Super
preparation
dark.
for yeah, yes. And in preparation for this episode, I went back and watched the teaser trailer. I had the same reaction to it. I was like, that looks like a great movie. I had been a fan of the original. My dad showed me the original. I loved it. I think I've seen the sequels, but I don't remember a whole lot about them. I don't think they're very good, but I couldn't swear by that, but I'm also never going to watch them. So,
I have seen them, and I can vouch that they were not good movies.
okay, I believe you. I do remember. Which is it in the second one where Charlton Heston's in the movie for like 90 seconds and gets shot in the head?
Yeah, yeah, it was the
Okay,
second one.
yeah,
Yeah.
I thought so. This was a time, 2001. This comes out. I think audiences in general had a very different, let's call it a more naive opinion about movie remakes. We had no reason to think this would be bad. I was really excited to see this movie. I saw it when it came out in theaters. What's your memory of this movie?
I just remember this looks gritty as a kid. I was
Yeah,
younger, and I think that could really just that was the bat signal of downfall. Was they were trying to make this like an action movie,
yeah.
and they were trying to make this right. They were trying to make this an action movie blockbuster. And when you really think about the heart of the original Planet of the Apes, that was not the story being told.
No, there's action in it, but it's not an action movie.
Right, and the fact that they were really emphasizing that this was going to be ape on ape warfare, or like ape on man warfare, a lot of
Yeah.
guerrilla action. As a kid, it's like, oh, that's cool. But now that I know the context of the original film, what it stood for, the messages being told, probably not the best film to want to make a huge summer blockbuster on. But
No.
yeah,
Yeah, the original had some. It's a great sci-fi movie by itself, but it has all these other pretty interesting like social commentary themes in it. But it's not too heavy-handed. There's a lot of reasons why that movie's so beloved. I think your choice of this movie is, like I said, I was thrilled when you picked this one, and I gotta say, doing the research on the production history of this movie is some of the more entertaining that I've ever done.
all right, lay it on us.
Now that we've talked about the origins of the franchise itself, the origins of this movie specifically are really interesting. 20th Century Fox, the studio that produced this, they had a great deal of pride in this franchise, and the
Oh
development
yeah,
for this movie, it goes back as far as 1988. They originally wanted to remake this movie then, and they were going to hire a guy, an indie filmmaker named Adam Rifkin, to do it. And his project came really close to reaching pre-production stage. They had a script. Fox liked it enough, but they ultimately canceled it due to disagreements. And at one point, Tom Cruise and Charlie Sheen were considered for the lead role, which is
ooh, Mr. Tiger Blood.
Yeah, I could kind of see Tom Cruise being in a Planet of the Apes movie. Maybe not now, but back in the day. But that project,
I see why Charlie Sheen, like, we know him now historically as crazy, but back then it's like, oh, that's Martin Sheen's kid,
right?
and he
He's
was a
coming
big
off
star.
Platoon. He's coming off Wall Street. He was hot on the streets.
Right.
That project just went nowhere. So you fast forward to 1993. Oliver Stone, of all people, becomes involved in this project, but not as a director. He was an Apes fan. He wanted to produce the movie. The movie was going to be called Return of the Apes. Arnold Schwarzenegger was interested in starring in the movie. So just think about that for a second. We could have gotten, in the 90s, an Oliver Stone produced Planet of the Apes sequel starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Wild. Wild. I kind of want it. I kind of want to see it. It'll never happen. Yeah. It's probably for the best it didn't happen, but they were going to hire a director named Philip Noyce. He was pretty hot at the time. He directed movies in the 90s that are pretty famous. He did the 2 Tom Clancy movies with Harrison Ford, Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger. He did that movie with Val Kilmer called The Saint, which I think we should do on this podcast. It's a pretty good.
That was an adaptation. Great film.
Yeah, I really like that movie. It didn't do well, but it's a pretty interesting movie.
It was fun. It's a fun one.
I agree. I like it. He Noyce also did The Bone Collector with Denzel, and he did an underrated adaptation of Graham Greene's The Quiet American. I just wanted to give that a shout out because it's a movie I like. Just imagine, just to come back to this, Oliver Stone doing a Planet of the Apes movie, because I immediately thought that Lee Harvey Oswald looked like a chimp, and I could just see Oliver Stone incorporating maybe the apes killed Kennedy.
Back and to the left.
Yeah. Because as we know from this movie that we're talking about, time travel is a thing,
right?
In this movie, so it's possible.
Actually, canonically, Chimp Kennedy was killed by a chimp assassin.
Right.
But that's really going to the spoilers of what we find out at the end, right?
Correct. That's exactly right. That was probably going to be the sequel, but. The screenwriter in the studio, they had major disagreements on this project. Philip Noyce leaves the project in 1995 to actually make The Saint. This is around the time when James Cameron's name became attached to the project. He was interested in doing it, but after Titanic became very successful, he drops out, and this is the same time that Schwarzenegger drops out as well. But Fox remains committed to making this. They're going to make this movie regardless of what happens.
They're committed to the ape life.
They are. Chris Columbus, Roland Emmerich.
Who gets attached?
All these names are getting thrown around.
Keep going. Peter Jackson, Michael Bay.
Yep. The Hughes brothers. I had to look them up, but they were apparently a thing then. They finally settle on Tim Burton because of this 1999 script that gets rewritten by William Broyles Jr. And this script is well-liked enough that Tim Burton agrees to direct the movie. This is early 2000. I have a interesting quote from Tim Burton that I want to read to you about this movie. He said, quote, "I wasn't interested in doing a remake or a sequel of the original Planet of the Apes film, but I was intrigued by the idea of revisiting that world. Like a lot of people, I was affected by the original film. I wanted to do a reimagining," end quote. I kind of rolled my eyes reading that because, put a pin in that, I want to come back to that. His quote about not doing a remake, but doing a reimagining. The movie was originally given a $200 million budget. That would have made it the most expensive movie ever greenlit at the time, but Fox eventually reduced it to $100 million. And it's produced by a gentleman named Richard Zanuck. He greenlit the original Planet of the Apes back when he was head of Fox in 1967. I don't think we're going to be talking about producers' names specifically a lot on this podcast, but I did want to mention Zanuck because he produced a lot of successful movies. He actually won an Oscar for producing Driving Miss Daisy. The most significant thing about him is he was instrumental in launching the career of helping to launch the career of young Steven Spielberg. He produced Spielberg's first 2 movies, The Sugarland Express, and most notably Jaws. I just thought that was really interesting history there.
Definitely.
Mark Wahlberg, this is where he enters the picture. He signs on to do this movie after meeting with Tim Burton for 5 minutes. I couldn't find a lot of information on who else was in the running for the role. It seems like he signed on pretty early. And it's pretty noteworthy.
5 minutes in, I think Burton showed him the screenplay, and then Mark Wahlberg said, "I can't read, but let's do this."
Yes. It was a good move for Wahlberg at the time, but I think it's interesting because he backed out of a role in Ocean's 11 to do this movie. That is the role that went to Matt Damon.
I
So there's
mean,
an alternate universe here where he's in the Ocean's movies, and maybe Matt Damon ends up in this movie. I don't know. It's probably a better movie.
I think that would have been fun to have Mark Wahlberg in Ocean's 11, but just like in the Planet of the Apes, it wasn't meant to be in terms
No.
of.
It's interesting because we know Matt Damon can convincingly play an astronaut.
That's true. We've seen
more than once. He can play a good astronaut and a bad astronaut.
Oh, fair.
He can do both. Do you want to talk about Tim Burton? I know you're a Burton guy.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely like I'm a fan of Tim Burton. It's important to always just like kind of think about what are some hallmarks to the Tim Burton overall aesthetic. It's like there's dark tones. There's almost like a Burton universe. It's
incredible visual storyteller,
right? And sometimes when you have this like star universe of like different Helena Bonham Carter, particularly, all often Burton films, there's a signature, right, to Burton films, and it felt like Planet of the Apes. It was kind of the worst aspects of a Burton film. I feel like.
I think you're right. It's possible this is his worst movie. The reason why we wanted to do this movie is like this. On paper, this was like such a great fit for him. I was really excited. I was like, "Oh, Tim Burton's directing the movie." I was like, "This should be great."
Right. I mean, there's so much to be said about this. Like, I don't think that Tim Burton ever went in and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna make a really, really bad Planet of the Apes reimagining." When he says that term reimagining, I really do take that very seriously. In that there's probably a vision of how do you create a gritty, dark world for the Planet of the Apes that is able to kind of bring life to a society that fits into that dark aesthetic that Tim Burton's known for. And I, for one, love when directors take chances to take reimaginings, breathe life into these intellectual properties that's different from before. Because why, like, if I wanted to watch something that was so close to the original Planet of the Apes, I would just watch the original Planet of the Apes. I want something unique if I'm watching something in 2001 from Tim Burton. But what I think it lost was the spirit of what made the original Planet of the Apes good. Right?
Hold that thought. You bring up some really interesting points. I want to come back to them.
Right.
Where this movie succeeds is it is a very good looking movie. I think it's a very cool visual style. The makeup obviously holds up. The effects pretty much held up upon rewatch. The sets and the costumes, I think all of that worked. And now let's talk about why wasn't it better?
Well, one,
got to start with the acting. You got to start with it.
All right. So as humans watching the film, could we even relate to any of the human characters?
No, and so we both of us watched this a couple weeks ago to prep for this, and I texted you some of my initial thoughts. I think you can divide the actors into the two camps that are quite obvious, the humans and the apes. None of the human characters are interesting, and most importantly, Mark Wahlberg's character. And I challenge you, Anton, right now. What is the name of his character?
Ooh, I just remember it as Mark Wahlberg. That's rough.
Well, I didn't remember it either, but his name is Leo Davidson.
Yeah.
Aspiring young astronaut who happens to work with chimpanzees on a space station in the middle of space. He's just not a convincing astronaut.
No.
He's miscast in this movie. I don't think he's the biggest problem with this movie, but
he's not. He
didn't help.
Especially when we think of what, like, if Mark Wahlberg in that role is supposed to represent a relatable, like, human character that would be thrust into a situation, not relatable or believable in any aspect.
No. And I don't want to hate on Wahlberg too much because I really do like him in a lot of movies. I think he's a really gifted comedic actor. But I want to do a little exercise with you.
Right.
Definitely. I think he learned a lot from this movie. But I want to do a little exercise with you here, because I think in the right role, I think he's brilliant. In the wrong role like this, it doesn't work. This movie got me thinking. Rewatching this got me thinking about some of the roles that he's good at playing. So let's go through some, and I want you to either respond with a yes or no. Astronaut who works with chimpanzees, is he good at it or no?
No.
Okay. Doctor.
No.
Racist cop.
Yes.
Lawyer.
No.
Dim-witted porn star.
Yes.
Unhinged, possibly murderous ex-boyfriend.
Yes.
Male model.
Yes.
Inventor.
No.
I think we just found a transformer. They actually really tried to have him be an inventor in one of the Transformers movies. That's a true story. Let's go with deep sea fisherman.
No.
No, yeah. Sniper? I say yes.
No. I say no.
Oh, okay.
I say no.
Rapper.
Yes.
He was a rapper.
Yeah.
In real life. He didn't just play a rapper, he was a rapper. How about a thief?
Yes. Say yes. Yeah.
Oil rig technician.
No. He wouldn't survive.
Pothead.
Yes.
Personal trainer.
Oh, yes.
Pothead personal trainer.
In another universe, he is a pothead personal trainer.
That's all I could come up with. But as we can see that we just proved from this list, he's good at certain roles and just not good at other ones. One of the things I'm sorry. One of the things I texted you.
Yeah, when you texted me this, it was hilarious.
I can't.
And it was so true.
It's so true. Yeah, I noticed upon rewatch, his mouth is just partially open for a good portion of this movie. I don't know if it was an intentional decision on his part. I don't know if Burton or other people noticed, but he manages to breathe through his mouth for most of the entire movie, but he succeeds in never looking surprised, which is actually kind of difficult. You'd think you would be, if you landed on a planet where they were talking apes, you'd think you would at least be surprised. But he doesn't look surprised to be there. He looks startled, like he just saw like a spider or something. But it's kind of like a...
Well, he's a great big action hero. Let's remember, right? Like
he is. He tried to be here.
He tried to be.
Look, I don't want to trash him too much, because I really don't think he's the biggest problem with this movie. I don't think.
Let's think about the other cast of humans who you've lovingly dubbed the Funky Bunch.
That's right. I called them. They're known as the Funky Bunch for the purposes of this movie. They're terribly acted.
Oh yeah, the kids in this just bad.
It's never explained who the teenager is that's just tagging along with them.
No, just someone else. Stella Warren.
Hot. Yeah. Bad actress though.
Just perfect makeup the whole time.
Yeah.
Right?
You really notice it on the Blu-ray.
Like very glossy looking.
Yeah.
The entire film.
Well, it's strange because she's got a lot of... Now, obviously, they use makeup on actors all the time, but she's got a lot of like model makeup on, but she's wearing rags. It's strange. And Chris Christopherson just puts in a masterclass performance in this movie. He has 5 lines, and he doesn't make it very far. I think he kind of lucked out because he didn't have to be in this movie very long. And then there's the guy that looks like Terry Crews, but he's not Terry Crews. I don't know who he is.
Michael Clark Duncan, the guy.
No, he's one of the Funky Bunch.
Oh, okay. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
But the reason you don't remember him is he's not well acted either.
Yeah, that's fair.
Let's talk about the Apes, because they're played by great actors. It's one after another. Great actors. Tim Roth, Michael Clark Duncan, who I actually think is pretty good in this movie. Paul Giamatti, Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, one of my all-time favorite actors. I know you like him too.
Oh, huge.
Love him. And then, I don't know if you notice this, the guy that plays Helena Bonham Carter's character's father is David Warner, who's like a legendary character actor.
Right.
He's been in so many movies.
One of his last films is this film.
Was it? I thought
Yeah.
he was around longer than that. You might be right, but he was in so many. He was all over Star Trek. He's in like Titanic, pops up in there, all over the place. Now, this movie, one of the praises of this movie was the actors that played the apes. They got pretty high praise, except for Helena Bonham Carter. She got singled out as being bad. I kind of get it because she delivers every line like she's whispering, like she's conveying a great family secret. Like, we need to get out of the kitchen.
Or hilariously just outbursting in ape vocalizations.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I disagree with the reviews. I think basically almost all of the actors that play the apes are horrible. They're hamming it up way too much. Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, he's the only one who understands subtlety. He's pretty reserved. It's a good performance from him. My problem with it, there's no subtlety to any of the performances except for the one I just mentioned. It's ridiculous overacting. They're playing it like these animated cartoon characters. I think it works against the movie because at the same time, we're supposed to take things seriously, and it only makes it more laughable. Think about the original Planet of the Apes. All of the actors who play the apes, they're all playing it straight. Like the guy that plays Zaius, Maurice Evans, he plays it pretty straight. There's not
right, because that was part of the sci-fi aspect, is that the superior master race that are controlling the world are the apes, and that they're highly evolved, right?
Right.
So then in this film, they still have instinctual ape behavior. Perhaps is maybe what they're trying to have the audience
It's
assume.
Not clear.
No.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Tim Roth, he got a lot of the praise. And I think his performance is memorable, but he's seething angry you texted me about this. He's just angry all the time.
Why is he so mad?
There's no explanation. He's like foaming at the mouth, angry. He hates humans so much. It doesn't explain why though.
Not a well-rounded character.
No,
just one-dimensional, not relatable. Like not like a which I think is huge in that like we couldn't like find a villainous ape character that has zero redeeming qualities. Like maybe if it was like was wronged by humans in the past or any other aspect that would kind of drive like why he was just so angry all the time.
Yeah, they didn't.
Just irrationally angry. And by the way, let's kind of think about let's go deep and think about what is the director, what are the writers trying to like tell to the audience here. Is it that sometimes is it like xenophobia? Is it like, oh, sometimes like racists are just so angry that they're just so foaming at the mouth and this is how they're presented?
Yeah.
Because like this just seems like a caricature of what was meant to be like a good character. Not a great way to tell the story.
I think we're in complete agreement on it. Something else I noticed too. Roth makes this decision where his head is down the entire time and he's looking up through his eyebrows just at every character. It's really strange.
Yeah.
Did you read this too? Tim Roth turned down the role of Snape in Harry Potter to do this?
That's nuts to me. I do have a theory. I have a theory that the costumes in the film made it hard to just act or move or like even just interact. So
that's
maybe
fair.
Like while filming, they were like, move your hands around a lot. Really move, like really act with your body to just sell the character or sell who you're playing.
That's fair.
And then that's how we get very animated performances.
Oh, I think you're right. I have no doubt Burton was like, yeah, go crazy.
Yeah, just go with it. Just really ape out.
Here's a bottle of Jack. Yeah, just go crazy.
Ape it out.
The storytelling in this movie, I think is probably the big problem with it. And I read that they were working on rewrites on the script even as the film entered production. Now that happens in a lot of movies. I don't think it helped this one. The plot of this movie, so just to back up for 1 second, the premise of Planet of the Apes is a compelling one. That's
Yeah.
most of the reason why people are interested in Planet of the Apes in general. It's just a cool concept. The plot of this movie, the actual plot, idiotic. The entire movie begins because Wahlberg is a dumbass and just goes rogue
to save the monkey.
Yep, he does, and I can understand his affection. I get it. Also, why don't they just use robots? Why are there apes on the space station?
Or like, why does he feel the need to waste what looks like probably millions in dollars of equipment to go after a monkey in a black hole?
I couldn't figure it. Was it actually a black hole? They kept calling it like an electrical storm, but it acted like a black hole, right? Because we don't know it at the time, but he goes into the future like Marty McFly, which they explain at the end. We'll get to the ending. Hammering on the plot, he crash lands onto this jungle planet. It's like a swamp. It looks suspiciously like Dagobah from The Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
My big problem with the plot begins immediately. He crash lands, gets out of the pool. He immediately runs into other humans. He immediately runs into Chris Christopherson and the apes that are chasing them. And I do mean immediately. He does not even take 20 steps before he stumbles into Chris Christopherson and the hunt. And that gives us, the audience, no time to absorb the new location. There's no sense of geography that gets established. Think about the original movie. Charlton Heston, Taylor, and his two companions, they crash land in the lake. They get out and they're in like a desert environment. They wander around for what seems like days before they even encounter any signs of life. None of that is done here.
So there's aspects, right? Two things that we're looking at: setting and pacing. How do you make a good setting to build the world? How do you pace the story to explore it? Pacing, I feel like, is a thing of the past. Films are just moving way too fast, trying to do too much. And then in the setting, again, it just doesn't lend itself to world building.
No, and it's the reason I want to hammer on this is because it comes up later in the movie. So his spaceship crash lands and he immediately runs into the humans and the apes, right? How do none of the other characters see his ship crash? And I bring this up because those two gorillas that Tim Roth's character, General Thade, he ends up murdering them, if you remember later in the movie, because they come to him and they're like, we saw this thing crash.
Yeah, we found this thing.
Right. But how did no one else see it crash?
Yeah, and
they were in the middle of a hunt. There's an army of apes there. Like, how did none of them see this thing crash?
What he was wearing, very different from everyone else.
Yes.
That kind of raises some red flags.
Marky Mark, you mean?
Right.
Yes. Those two gorillas, by the way, and I think this is a really dumb plot hole. You assume that he kills them to cover up the existence of humans coming from elsewhere, right?
Right.
But that's not what happens. He doesn't find out about the origin of the humans until after that, when his father, Charlton Heston, tells him about it. So there's no logical explanation for him murdering those two gorillas.
Other than he's an asshole, unless the movie was just trying to tell us this guy's an asshole.
That's very possible. I think you're correct, and also it was not well written. I think they didn't put a lot of thought into that.
No, they did not.
The writing in this movie really bothered me. They switched the famous line to Michael Clark Duncan. Is the screenwriter a dick?
In the very beginning, too.
Like, they step on it immediately. They just ruin it immediately. Why would they do that? And to be fair, though, I don't even know if Wahlberg was capable of delivering that line.
But when you think about how important it was in the original film when that line was spoken.
Pivotal. Huge.
And it's just a throwaway gag, essentially, in the 2001 remake.
I think we're coming to maybe my biggest issue with the actual plot. The reason why I don't think this plot works, there's no drama. Marky Mark, he crashes by himself. He doesn't have companions to explore the planet with. Think about the original movie. Like, his two companions, one of them gets shot, the other one gets lobotomized. Marky Mark never goes through the pain of being a mute, dumb human like Heston does in the original. He doesn't seem surprised to be there. It really bothered me that the humans can talk in this version. It's not how it's supposed to work. It really dilutes the role reversal metaphor in the original movie where the humans are like just dumb animals in the eyes of the apes.
Yeah, pure.
It's so stupid.
Right, and then it's just pure subjugation on like Mark Wahlberg's part to just play along, or like, yeah, I'm stuck in here. You guys, you're stuck in here too? They're like, yeah. They're like, oh, you can speak, great.
It's and like not only can they speak, he shows up and the girl's like, hey man, what's going on? Like it's just all these plot holes. Michael Clark Duncan's after he gets captured, Michael Clark Duncan's character, he tells Paul Giamatti's character, be careful about this when he's feisty. He's referring to Wahlberg. But Wahlberg's done nothing to merit that.
No.
It makes me wonder if there was just a bunch of cut scenes that like fleshed this out more. But he gets out of there real quick. There's, like I said, there's no drama. He's there for like maybe a couple hours, and he's just like, I got Celtics tickets. I need to get home.
But I mean, that kind of assumptions that like we need to make as the viewers of just like kind of piecing together the plot. There's a good portion of that in good films where it's like, oh yeah, we can make assumptions, but there were literally just things being thrown in, and you're just like, what happened, or like, why would he be feisty, right? I think that
he doesn't do anything except get captured. That's it.
Yeah, no, that's it. I think maybe he touched his foot.
That's right. That angered Michael Clark Duncan.
Yes.
That angered him. It angered him so much that he called him a damn dirty human.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of other really bad plot holes that exist here. When he actually finds the spaceship, it cracks me up because this thing has presumably been there tens of thousands of years. And he's like, it runs on nuclear power. It's fine. All the sliding doors work. The video log works. All the stuff just works. There's a convenient video log that provides plenty of exposition for us.
Well, they wrote it in. They had to.
They sure wrote it in. Look, I mean, think about the original. When Taylor finds the Statue of Liberty, you immediately know what happened without anyone really saying it. You get a hint earlier because Dr. Zayas tells him, your kind made a desert of this place long ago. You may not like what you find. It's good screenwriting. He just says, like, you blew it up. As soon as you see the Statue of Liberty, you're like, holy crap.
Right.
And in here, they're like, here's this spaceship. And by the way, it's not that clear. So we're going to give you a narrated video log to explain what happens. With a bunch of an edited narrated video log that explain what happens.
So, well, remember, again, this was supposed to just be a summer blockbuster for easy popcorn consumption. So there's no reason to have viewers jump through hoops. It's just exposition in a box.
One of the other things I've read online is how did the horses get on the planet? That's just funny.
Yeah, that's great.
And
that's hilarious.
Why is there a weird hinted at love triangle between Marky Mark, Helena Bonham Carter, and the white girl?
Because there has to be.
Does there?
Because it's a Hollywood blockbuster. Why not have?
Sure.
Why not hint at ape man love?
Some of the other notes I have. How do the thousands of humans show up at the end? Aren't they all slaves? Does this mean there was a mass revolt? Wahlberg's been there for he's been on the planet for I think 2 days at most. How do they all know to go there? At this Kalima place, which ends up being the ship.
Right.
They just show up. Now, like I said, I think he had Celtics tickets. He just wanted to get home. So he had a real sense of urgency to wrap this up. And I can appreciate that.
He's Boston proud.
Boston proud. Why do we need a giant battle at the end? You hinted on this in the beginning. The original's not an action movie. This doesn't need to be an action movie. And I don't think Tim Burton is an action director. I don't think of him as an action director.
No, but that's what you watch the trailer and this is just the expectations coming to fruition. There has to be some
Yeah.
form of like it's got to be action packed. It's the summer. People want to see like a big battle,
Well,
and
there's
it
not
just makes
enough.
no sense.
It's I like Michael Clark Duncan's line at the end about burying humans and apes together. So their entire culture, which has existed for thousands of years, they just do a 180 on it in 10 seconds. And look, speaking of the action, right? This movie isn't violent enough.
No, but I think when you look at it in the lens of maybe the early 2000s, maybe it was for that time period.
I don't know.
Because well, think about this: the original Spider-Man that also kind of came out around the same time, 2001. That got a PG-13 rating. I don't think there was anything that would warrant that nowadays. If you look back at that film,
Yeah, that movie's pretty. There's nothing. It's not a very violent movie.
the most violent thing I think is Green Goblin getting impaled by the Goblin glider, but that could be edited.
That's fair. You better believe we're doing Spider-Man 3. I can't wait to hear.
Good.
I can't wait to hear all of your thoughts on Spider-Man 3.
Oh, so good.
It's an all-timer.
But
I just think this movie should have been more violent. If you're talking about apes and humans battling it out, there's faces getting ripped off. But I understand why they couldn't do it. I get it.
Right, but that's why when you think about Tim Burton, it's always been subtle touches of dark flair. Never like it's never been like there's no hints of like into like the grotesque when it comes to Tim Burton.
It's true.
So we wouldn't even really necessarily think of like like there wouldn't be like anything that would hint towards like violence per se in like a Burton film.
What's the most violent movie he's done? Maybe would you say Sleepy Hollow?
Which even that's not a very violent film. I mean, like
no, it's kind of you're right. It's kind of cartoonish.
Or there was, I mean, kind of recently the Alice films, right? And there was like battle scenes in that, but
it looked like a cartoon.
Right, like it's very cartoony. It's very light. It's still in that like aesthetic of like a gothic-esque. I mean, I just saw Sweeney Todd again recently. Even then, like there were
I like that movie.
Yeah, bloody scenes, but not necessarily like over the top.
No, I like.
But
that.
anyway.
Do you want to talk about the ending of this movie? Because I think it's
Ape Savior, Chimp Savior.
Yeah, it's. Does this even count as a plot twist if it doesn't make sense? Because it doesn't make sense.
I am convinced that they had no idea how they were going to end this one.
Oh, well, there's evidence to confirm that, my friend. Because Tim Roth, in his own words, quote, "I cannot explain that ending. I've seen it twice and I don't understand anything." And in an interview, Tim Burton, this is on YouTube. You don't even need to there's no paraphrase. He claimed the ending was not supposed to make any sense. It was not supposed to make any sense. He said it was supposed to be a cliffhanger that could be explained in a possible sequel. It's completely illogical. There's no reasonable explanation for it. Forget any of the random Reddit theories you could read. There's no explanation for the ending of this movie.
It just made no sense.
I hate it for an even worse reason. It actually ruins the actual plot twist of the movie. There is an actual kind of cool plot twist in this movie. The real plot twist is when Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch discover the truth about Kalima. That he is responsible for everything that has happened on the planet. He crash lands on the planet going forward in time. His spaceship with all of his mates on it, they go through the same storm looking for him. They crash land on the planet. the apes revolt. That's how
Right.
their respective offspring populate the planet. That is the actual plot twist, and it's actually kind of I wouldn't call it a good plot twist, but they completely ruin it. It's executed poorly. There's another 30 minutes left of the movie, including that dumb battle. And the one thing, the reason the ending is terrible because the one thing that people tend to remember about this movie is the stupid ending, which isn't even the real plot twist.
I think when the screenwriters or the writers thought about how do we do a fresh take on Planet of the Apes, again, it was looking at what drove like shock and awe almost in their minds. And an
Yeah.
aspect would be like, oh, an ending reveal that would, shock people. And so
Well, the
you take
original had a
that.
shock ending.
Yeah,
We need to have a shock
right,
ending here.
right. But like when you think about it in that aspect, it's almost just like saying, well, we got to make sure that the Christmas tree has its ornate ornament, right? But then you figure out that that ornament is actually it's just a cheap knockoff. It was just trying to find it was just trying to find the aspect, which was some sort of plot twist, and put it at the end, irregardless of message to be told, of something to take away from the story, or how does it work cohesively in the storyline. It's literally just, let's throw some sort of twist at the end, even though we have something else that works better in the actual storyline.
Completely agree. I think if they didn't have the ending that they did when Marty McFly takes the DeLorean back through the wormhole. Oh shit, sorry, that's not the same movie. When Leo Davidson returns to Earth and discovers that apes have just populated it. I think if they hadn't featured that, I don't think it would have saved the movie. It would have improved it though. Because like I mentioned earlier, like one of the only thing people remember about this movie is the dumb ending.
Yeah.
You made an earlier observation about remakes. Ultimately, everything that we've been discussing feeds into the problem with remakes. Here's the thing with remakes. This is why I think a movie like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek reboot did well, and this one didn't. I wanted to see everything that was just like the original Planet of the Apes, just with new stuff, or go completely different, like the reboot prequel trilogy did, The Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where
Right.
they didn't have any references to the original movie,
No,
really.
but I
No,
respect it. I respect that.
yes.
Yeah.
This movie, they half-assed it. They got caught in this
Totally.
halfway house. I think audiences, we want the same thing as the original, just with modern new stuff. We wanted to see Marky Mark go through the same drama that Charlton Heston did. Crashes with his crew. His crew gets killed. He gets a throat injury. He can't talk. He has to go through being the pain of being a dumb human. You really felt for those guys in the original when they were stranded. You're like, holy crap, they are never getting home. We wanted to see him say the famous line. We got a very dumbed down version of that. They shoehorned in all of these ridiculous you disagree or agree?
No, I just like I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. I just feel like it's movies like this that signal how blockbuster films play out, right? And like when we think, and I speak to the formula of it. And if the money shows that being that trying to take an IP and run with it and have fun with it, or like try to put your own reimagining on it, doesn't work, that's going to mean less and less studios are willing to fund projects for directors to have the vision that they want. That's how you get the Star Wars trilogy of our era, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So like there, while I may not like, I'm just gonna say this right now. While it wasn't better than while it was not better than we could have hoped, I do have a respect for at least trying to take some creative reimaginings, at least trying, because they could have done what you just said, which is just do the whole plot again, like scene by scene, but just throw in Mark Wahlberg, which
Yeah.
could have just been, it would have been cheap, but probably would have done better in the box office.
I think it would have done better. I think by doing this is coming back to that Burton quote about a reimagining. They completely whiffed on so many things that made the original good. I get what he meant by the difference between a remake and a reimagining, but I don't think most audiences can tell the difference between the two. I don't know if they were trying to outdo the original. I think they were with the ending, and they just failed miserably. This version has no social commentary, no real message like the first one did.
No.
And it doesn't really have any reason to exist besides just being a remake. I think it's one of the most disappointing remakes ever. I really do. The prequel trilogy that they made is, I think, pretty good. It justified itself because they had the environmental concern stuff, the animal testing, the social structure. You know, the original movies involved like nuclear annihilation and stuff like that. And,
Right.
I'm not saying yeah.
Yeah, the themes were strong. The stories were
Yeah.
strong. What the takeaway was very clear. There was no clear takeaway from this film.
No, I really like Roger Ebert's review of this movie, and he has a quote that I pulled from here that I want to read because I think he just nails it. He said, quote, "The movie's great looking. Rick Baker's makeup is convincing even in the extreme close-ups, and his apes sparkle with personality and presence. The sets and locations give us a proper sense of alien awe. Tim Burton made a film that's respectful to the original and respectable in of itself, but that's not enough. 10 years from now, it will be the 1968 version that people are still renting," end quote.
I mean, that's a much more favorable review than I feel like a lot of people would give. I mean, what? It took us like finding it like randomly being streamed on Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Thank goodness I didn't have to pay more money to see it. I think he gave it 2.5 out of 4 stars, which is probably not as much as I would give it. There's one other aspect of this movie I think that's a factor here of why it wasn't better.
Mm-hmm.
Wahlberg had something to say after it. He said, quote, they didn't have he was talking about how rushed the movie was. He said, quote, they didn't have the right script. They had a release date before Tim Burton, had shot a foot of film. They were pushing him in the wrong direction. You have to let Tim do his thing, end quote. And Burton said that he would, quote, rather jump out of a window than participate in a sequel. So they really rushed this movie.
Yeah.
And it's a money reason, I'm sure.
And I think
we touched on it.
Yeah, we did. It's a studio has their own objectives, right? To make the money and make it on their timeline. So they're willing to sacrifice and leave things on the cutting room floor. So
I think to their credit, despite the financial success, they were hoping for more money. They decided not to make a sequel, but to their credit, they returned to the franchise 10 years later with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the reboot that was ultimately a trilogy. And apparently there's a 4th one coming out. Those are pretty good. My point is, I think they learned their lesson from this one, and they amended all of the mistakes that they made with this Tim Burton one into the prequel trilogy that they ultimately made.
I think that there are a lot of things. There are a lot of devices in writing that can make it difficult for writers to tell a cohesive story, whether that's like time travel, it's hard to write. It's hard to write a good story. And
it is.
By even taking that away, you have like a good story. So even being able to just tell a good sci-fi stories of how apes gain intelligence to the level of having a planet of the apes. Really well done.
Yeah. Well, Roger Ebert's prediction came true because this movie is almost entirely forgotten. It's not really well regarded by Apes fans and not really regarded by Tim Burton fans either. And think about it. Those are two pretty big fan bases. It had the potential to be remembered by both, and it was rejected by both.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about this movie.
Yeah, no one claims that film.
When was the last time you had a conversation with anyone about this movie?
When you and I talked about it. Exactly. But I do think that there's something to say that when if you were to go up to someone and talk about, like, do you remember that Planet of the Apes film?
Yeah.
It was Tim Burton enough that people were like, oh yeah, like the gorillas with the costumes, and it was a really dark film, and then it
The
had that
ending was
really
so
weird, that
stupid.
crazy ending.
Yeah.
There's something to say to that. It's like, at least we can laugh together about it.
Definitely. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious by now, but did you like this movie, Anton?
I did not. What about you, Pat?
No. I give it a D on an A to F scale. I give it a
Okay.
D. I was so excited for it. I disliked it immediately. I think I saw it maybe once more, like a year later when my family rented it. I felt the same, and so I hadn't seen it in about 20 years. Rewatching it for this podcast, my opinion of it kind of lessened. It was bad then, and it's worse now. I think there's some. I mentioned the stuff I liked,
Yeah.
but it's not a very good movie.
I will give it a D plus. So it's in that same range of, like, this is, if C's average, it's
Yeah,
like getting close to average.
yeah.
Things
I
that
don't.
held it
Yeah,
back. Of course, we talked about what held it back, but what I think is a redeeming quality, and it's why it's completely subjective, is just how is that I could laugh at it. There are bad films that you can't laugh at. There are bad films that you can't, like, look at it and be like, endearing.
right, right.
But there was
It's
so
yeah.
much of it. Yeah.
It's not horrible.
Yeah.
It's well made.
But
It's got good actors in it.
too much was bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I don't know how many movies I'm actually going to rate an F on this podcast, but if I ever rate something an F, I'm talking about, like, that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. This movie is much better than that.
Right. Like, now, am I watching this and, like, losing myself thinking that I'm in the Planet of the Apes? No, there's a
No.
really good reason why that's part of a D. But,
Yeah.
you know, it is something that, like, you can sit through and laugh at and remember that time that Helena Bonham Carter yelled into people's faces as an ape
And whispered.
and whispered.
Would you watch this movie again? Because I wouldn't.
I would not. I'm good watching it not one more time, but I do not think I'm gonna ever watch this movie again.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I think that's a wrap.
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
I think it's a valiant effort to take on remakes for historically just great films. And just like any uphill battle, you don't always achieve it. But
Yeah.
I do think that there are some qualities that were good, but overall, we can get off this planet and say goodbye, Planet of the Apes.
We're never coming back.
We're never coming back.
Well, that's it for this episode of Why Wasn't It Better? Have we selected our next movie?
I don't think it's quite set yet, but our listeners will see on the episode listing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what I want to do.
All right, well, I chose the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do, we'll do that. We'll trade off. Look at this. We can just, the nice thing about making our own rules is that we can follow them or break them as often as we see fit. I think for the second movie we cover, I want to talk about The Dark Knight Rises.
Ooh, a hitter on the next one. All right, let's have some fun.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm Anton Paras.
I'm Patrick Darms,
and this is Why Wasn't It Better? Take care, everyone. Bye.